Welcome to the Career Refresh Podcast. I'm your host, Jill Griffin. I'm a former media and marketing executive turned career strategist and executive coach. I spent my career working my way up and through the ranks of global organizations and startups, and today I show others how to do the same. Join me each week as we discuss the strategies and actionable steps to leverage your strengths, increase your confidence, and develop your career well-being. Ready? Let's do it. This is the Career Refresh Podcast, and I'm your host, Jill Griffin. This week, I have the pleasure of interviewing Jane Ashen Turkowitz. She is a career services professional and an executive recruiter in New York City with more than 20 years experience. Jane and I met digitally years ago and have always kept in touch, and she's such a incredible thought leader. And what she is sharing today, this is definitely an episode where you want to grab a pen, you want to open your notes app, because she is talking about all the things from how to get through the applicant tracking systems and how to network, and that we're not treating it as a transactional conversation, but to really think about it in the way of building a relationship. Currently, Jane is in partnership and development oversight for University of Texas at New York City, which is UTNY, and it is a place-based experiential learning program. At UTNY, Jane develops partnerships with corporations, nonprofits, art institutions, and associations to assist UTNY students in securing semester-long internships in New York City. People, she is doing tremendous work here. She also teaches UT students how to navigate their way through the interview process and get hired by some of the most competitive companies in the world and in one of the most competitive job markets we've seen in recent time. She is a featured blogger and she writes regularly about career-related topics on LinkedIn. She's also published a variety of articles in consumer trade publications. Her work has been featured in Business Insider, Adweek, iMedia, Elle, The Ladder's Real Simple, just to name a few. She has also been a panelist at industry events, including Women's in Communication. And you can also find her advice in the book, Wanted, A New Career, the definitive playbook for transitioning to a new career or finding your dream job, by Marlo Lyons. Jane is an expert in this area. She has spent her career prior to being a recruiter serving as a marketing executive, where she rose to the ranks of several companies like 17 Magazine, Disney, and the New York Times. She's a graduate of University of Michigan and an avid traveler, and she currently resides in Westchester with her husband, 2 kids, and her dog. Dig into this episode. As always, if you have any questions, email me at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. And listen, we can always bring Jane back. If you have questions, we can do an FAQ. We can bring her back and get your questions answered. Friends, thank you for being here. I wish you a beautiful week, one that is filled with so much possibility. Now, here's Jane. Hey, Jane. I am so excited that we get to have this conversation. I know we've been trying to do this for a while, so I'm glad that you're here today with me.
Hi, Jill. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. So, as I ask everyone, take us through your career journey. Like, you are a top, well-known recruiter, and you've made a pivot recently into going on to the academic side of things and recruiting there. But take us through how you got there. I mean, over 20 years of doing professional services and an executive recruiter, you've got a lot of information to share with us today. And I want you to tell us how you got there.
Yeah, sure. So I do like to start off by saying this, and I promise I won't be 20 minutes long, but I majored in Russian history at the University of Michigan. And people are always fascinated by that because why, and how did you end up doing what you're doing? My point in saying this is that it doesn't matter what you majored in. This is for your younger listeners. You never know where your career is going to pivot. I started out at the New York Times in market research, then went into marketing. I spent about 10 years on the marketing side in major media organizations when I decided I wanted to do something that was a little bit more people-oriented. And that's when I took a stab at recruiting. It came by fortuitously to me. I was thinking about it in my own brain, and I never said anything to anyone. And the only recruiter that I ever worked with happened to ask me if I was interested in a marketing director role at Us Magazine. And I said, actually, I'm pregnant. And she said, She said, well, how would you like to work for me as a recruiter? And I said, I can't believe you just asked me that. And that is how I started recruiting. So I do
That's
believe it was,
amazing.
yeah, there was karma, cosmic energy that put me there, and it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. And I always worked for sort of boutique agencies, helping them to build out their digital businesses when Web 1.0 started. And then I opened up my own firm called High Touch Executive Search back in 2014, in which I focused on executives only.
Okay. And then recently you made the switch to go to University of Texas, Austin.
Yes,
Tell us
I
about
did.
that.
So what happened is I started doing a fair amount of writing and blogging on career development, job search strategy, and leadership. And lo and behold, I started getting millions of readers on LinkedIn, which was really shocking, and getting picked up by the Business Insider and all these other places. And I was like, wow, I have something that I can give back here. I have something that people are interested in. I want to help students. I really want to help students who are just trying to navigate their way into the world of careers, and who's teaching them this stuff, really, from a recruiter's point of view, from somebody who's been in the business for so long. So I started building my resume, and I think this is really important for anybody out there who's looking to pivot. You can't just pivot. You have to actually do things to make yourself, someone that people want to hire in a different industry. So started doing some speaking arrangements, spoke at the University of Michigan, spoke at Pace, did some stuff with the ANA. And then this opportunity opened up at the University of Texas at Austin, and I jumped on it, became an advisor first for a year, and came on board in 2020. I am still based in New York, working for a New York program that they set up for New York-based internships.
Okay. So I want to touch on a few things that you said over the last few minutes. So one, Russian history, recruiting. And the takeaway of that, which I hear all the time, I studied law, I studied finance, I studied marketing. This is what I'm going to have to go back to school. I'm going to have to get a different degree. I mean, maybe not, right? So the idea that what you study is wonderful, right? Great. You have knowledge in an area. How can you apply that in a different way? I think that's the first point that I heard you make. Second point is the pivot. If you're going to apply it in another way, you need to be strategic about it. And one of the things that I always talk to people about is, how are you thinking about your professional brand? And whether you're putting your professional brand out there on a social media platform like a LinkedIn, or whether you're working your industry and going to trade events and, looking for opportunities to be a speaker, you have to put yourself out there so that you can be noticed. And then third is, you did it in stages, right? So first it was getting picked up by some of the trades, and as you said, Business Insider. And then it was also advising to UT, I guess it's UTNY, right? So advising to them, and then eventually becoming, right? So it's the various stages of it. It didn't happen necessarily overnight. And I love that. I think that's applicable to so many people in their job search, especially in our current market.
Absolutely. I think that it's a long hike. It's not the race. And I always say to people, I wrote a piece about this after I took this position with UTNY. This did not happen overnight. I had to build, stepping stones to get where I needed to do. And I had to make some sacrifices on compensation in order to get where I wanted to be. But I'm very fortunate at this point because I've got the ability to choose purpose over profit. And that's where I am in my career right now. It's really important for me to feel a sense of purpose in what I do. And every single time I have a student reach out to me and tell me that they got this great internship, or they're coming back to New York because they got a job at NBC Universal and they utilized all the skills that I gave them to get there, I cannot tell you how rewarding that is. But it did take steps and a process for me to get here, for sure.
Yes. So my takeaway to that for our listeners is, you are creating your next job today. You are in your job, you are doing what you need, or if you're applying, right? The actions you take today are creating what you're doing in the future. So reading, studying, networking, and I know you and I are going to go into a bit around networking and overall communications in our conversation today. But those are the things that you're doing today to create yourself the opportunity in the future. It is, to your point, the long game.
Absolutely. And the only thing that I would add to that, Jill, is that I feel like sometimes you don't even know where that path is going to take you. So you might be laying
down. And that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. You might be laying down those stones, but you don't realize where you're going to go with it. And that's the situation where I found myself. I had no idea that I was going to end up going in this direction. But it happened, and I made a plan of how I knew I wanted to get here. And, exactly what you said, I took the necessary steps to build my resume, to build my brand, to build a voice, and to get noticed.
Perfect. I use the analogy sometimes of like making a snowman, where your career is like that, where you're pulling in all of these pieces to sort of build it up, but it takes time to pull in those pieces to create the first snowball, the next snowball, right? That's the way I look at it. So as long as you're in that space where you're thinking consciously about your career strategy and what it is that you want, even if you don't know ultimately what you want, you know what you want to feel, kind of, are you working for purpose? Are you doing meaningful work? Very different, right? Making a difference is outward work. Meaningful work is a personal choice. No one has to know else it's meaningful. So what are the things that you want to think about as you're building your career strategy that everything that we're talking about today really lines up well for? So I want to get into the article. I think it was an article or a newsletter that you posted on LinkedIn, which I know got a lot of traction. So why don't you take our listeners through that story around the student and the internship?
Yeah, so recently I made a posting. I have a student who had applied for an internship at an agency, a PR firm in New York, and she developed a relationship with the recruiter there, who manages early careers. They spoke multiple times. She had a couple of interviews set up with different departments, exploratory stuff. Everybody really liked her. And as she was kind of moving through the process, she ended up getting another internship offer. And since she was coming from Texas to New York, there was a time period that she needed to adhere to, and she decided that she just wanted to accept this internship. It was a good offer. She didn't want to have to work on it the whole semester and be stressed out. Lo and behold, the recruiter from this agency saw on the student's LinkedIn profile that she had received another offer and accepted it, and sent her a note and said, so-and-so, I see you received another offer and accepted it. Congratulations, happy for you, but so disappointed. We were really hoping to bring you on as an intern this summer. I hope that we can stay in touch for the future. The student never wrote her back. And I subsequently saw that recruiter, and she shared this story with me, and she looked at me and she said, I was really disappointed. And I said, oh, she should have written you back. And she said, she should have. Like, we really liked her. And I thought she was interested in us as a company, and that we were building relationship. And it just felt like it was a very transactional interaction versus her really wanting to be here in the future. And I feel like she missed an opportunity there. So I wrote about this on LinkedIn, and I would say most people said, great advice to the student, relationship building is so important. But I did have a few people who wrote to me and said they didn't understand what the problem was. It was not an issue, whatever.
Right. And I think I saw some of those. Recruiters blow us off all the time.
Right. Recruiters blow us up all the time. And, and that just hurts my heart. And I'd say the old Jane would have responded to that and tried to explain it further. But I'm kind of done doing that. I feel like, you know what, if you don't understand the messaging here and the importance of it, I'm not here to teach that to you. You can make those bad decisions. But when you're out there and you're interviewing, if you have a recruiter who is responsive and wants to have a relationship with you, that's a gift. And it doesn't happen as often as it should. But when it does, you should take advantage of it, in my opinion.
Right. And perfect example. I mean, I think you and I don't think you ever placed me anywhere, but I think you and I first met 20 years ago, and have been connected in each other's career, where I've referred people to you, or if you've asked me if I've known people. I mean, that's what it's about. And I think, I don't know that we're ever going to have data on this. We might, but I also wonder if the impact of COVID on the current students who were in school and therefore went remote, and therefore their own education took on a different form where it wasn't face-to-face anymore. It wasn't about relationships in the same way because everything went remote. Now they're in the workforce. And I often wonder, because it is my 25 years of building a network and a relationship in an industry. I mean, I come out of media, marketing, advertising, technology, love that industry. I work adjacent to that now where I help people, as an executive coach in that industry. But it's that industry that kept me supported and intellectually connected through COVID as we were all in lockdown in New York City. That's the basis for so much of my professional career, and the idea of not having that or not having built that not only is sad to me, but I go, okay, great, you got a job. Where are you going next if you don't have a network to talk to people? Not only what are you seeing, but who do you know? And, how can we help each other in reciprocity through this? What are you seeing around the same idea and what's going on today, and how we can help our listeners really create relationships differently?
I think that COVID is part of it, but I also just think the nature of technology and social media and, phone use and just, people just don't talk to each other anymore. There was just an article that I read the other day that basically says the new etiquette with phones: you don't leave messages. You send a text and say, "Can you speak?"
Which does that? I'm like, just try it. I have agency. If I don't want to talk to you, here's an idea. I can now pick up the phone.
Right. But that's not what we do. Right. And if you look at, I don't like to generalize necessarily too much, but I would say the majority of younger people are not very comfortable picking up the phone and calling people or leaving messages. It's not the way that they were brought up. It's not how they learned. So I think those two things are certainly affecting students and their ability to be more communicative on a verbal level and a relationship building level. I also think that, networking is a bad word. Just most people think of it like a 4-letter word.
Okay. Love this.
When I train my students, what I say to them, networking is not a bad word. And what you need to do is flip it. So you need to stop looking at network as doing something to help yourself, but offering yourself up as being able to contribute. So let me give you an example, if I might.
Please.
I tell my students that you might be interested in an organization or a company for an internship, and you might not see an internship for that company. So figure out who the hiring manager is at that in the department that you're interested in, and reach out to them. And when you reach out to that person, what you're going to do is you're going to say, "I'm coming to New York. I'm going to be there from January through May of 2024. I'm looking for an internship in marketing for an entertainment and media organization that's in medium growth. And I'm really interested in your organization. Could you use an extra pair of hands this spring? I'd love to be able to help you." So you're flipping it. You're not saying, "How can you help me?" But here, I'm offering to help you. Right. And I will tell you, it works, but you have to teach the students how to do this because they're not intuitively going to do this. I got news for you. I think some of my your executives listening to this might be having an aha moment as well on this point.
I mean, I think it applies for all of us, right? That's why, when I mention reciprocity, so often it's like, oh, I don't want to network. I don't know what to say to the guy, right? Because you're coming at it under the veil of an ask. I need something and I don't know how to say that because I'm going to feel, off, or it's going to feel awkward, versus coming and sharing. We're talking about the entertainment industry and the marketing industry. Well, the writer's strike just ended. Maybe there's a point of view that you have on that where you can reach out to someone and have a conversation. And now next thing you know, you're not asking for anything, but by default, you're showing your thought leadership about how that applies. You're able to do that. And you're not necessarily being like, gimme. It's being in conversation with people.
Right. And I think that the two words that you said were really important to me are thought leadership. You can't go into these conversations without having done research and coming with a point of view and knowledge. because that's not going to get you anywhere. In my own example, I will tell you when this program UTNY launched, University of Texas in New York, and I wanted to be a part of it, I reached out to the associate dean who manages this program. And they didn't say, hey, I'm in New York City. I'm looking for an opportunity to get into career development and help students. Would you be open to having a conversation? What I said was, hey, I'm an executive recruiter in New York. I've been here my entire career, have connections across entertainment, media, technology, any kind of business you can think of. Let me help you make connections for your program.
I mean, right there is a best use case of how to approach people and go about it. I also recommend to my clients and to my listeners that, whatever trades or whatever podcasts or whatever media you're consuming about your specific industry, to be keeping, however you want to do a repository, but to be keeping links and articles at the ready so that you're making your own life a little bit easier. And then when you connect with someone, you can be useful and maybe share, oh, I saw this podcast that relates to what we were talking about. Again, you're showing that thought leadership, but doing that little by little so that you always have a fresh repository is a lot easier than, oh gosh, I have an interview next week. And now it's all of a sudden, it's like the night before the final and you're cramming. It's a completely different energy where you're able to come in with ease versus panic and graspy and like, I got to figure this out. It's totally different energy.
Yeah. And I would also just like to add something to that. I mean, that is all very true. But I also think that what happens with networking is that it does tend to be a little transactional when people don't really know how to do it. So after you make that connection, after you have that interview with that recruiter who seems to be interested in you, but wasn't able to pull the trigger as quickly as you would have preferred, stay in touch with that person. After you've had your internship or your job, stay in touch with that person, connect with them on LinkedIn. When it's their birthday, send them a birthday message. Set up Google searches so that you get information on what's going on with that company or organization. So you can send your contact a note and saying, oh, I just read about blah, blah, blah. Congratulations on that new business win. Yeah. Or congratulations on your promotion. Stay in touch. Don't just reach out when you need something.
Yes. All beautifully, beautifully said. So I want to ask you a couple of very specific questions that I see on LinkedIn regularly that people will ask me. I hear my other friends that are recruiters talk about too. And it's just, I know there's not a one size fits all for everyone, but let's talk about what is your definition of getting ghosted?
I love this question. I remember once I got into like a little online discussion with somebody who insisted that being ghosted is when a recruiter does not get back to you, even if you applied for a job. So technology has made it extremely easy to get your resume in an applicant tracking system. But what it has done is made it extremely difficult to get your resume actually reviewed by a hiring manager. So any one opportunity could get 10,000, 100,000 applications, and I am not joking. Yes. There is absolutely no way a recruiter can get back to every single person who applies for a role. Okay. It's just not feasible. That's why they have these tools where you can set up automatic replies to anyone who is not interviewed. Thank you for your candidate. Thank you for your application. Fortunately, we're not going to consider your candidacy at this time. At least it's a response, right? Ghosting is when you actually interact with a recruiter or hiring manager or both, and you interview for a job. And I would say even once, if you interview with a recruiter and the recruiter says, I'll get back to you and let you know what next steps are. If you don't hear from that recruiter or hiring manager, I consider that to be ghosting. The recruiter or hiring manager who interviews you, even if it's once, should get back. It's not that difficult. It takes 5 seconds to send an email to the people that you have actually interviewed for a role. I'm not talking about 10,000 applications for a resume.
Right.
So that's my personal feeling. And if you get multiple emails for a candidate and the candidate just wants to know what's going on, where am I in the process, and you don't get back to them, shame on you as a person. Shame on you as a person. It's not nice.
I love that because I think it also kind of releases a little bit of the pressure on what I see as like recruiters ghosted me, blah, blah, blah. So if you've had a conversation and they're saying, yeah, we're going to put you in the list of candidates to move forth and you don't hear back, yeah, that's ghosting. But if you've applied to any of the online ATSs and you've submitted a resume and you don't hear back, while it is really, really easy to set up some AI technology to have an automated response, thanks so much, we're moving forward. We're not moving forward with your application at this time. That's not ghosted. Ghosting is when you really don't hear anything again.
Right. When you're expecting to hear. Yes. After you've had a conversation, after you've been considered. And the most egregious ghosting, as we all know, is when someone goes through 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds of interviews, gives up all their time, and then they don't ever hear anything. And that is just, I just don't understand that at all. I just don't.
And it does happen. It does happen, unfortunately. Yes.
It does happen.
To that, how do you break through the ATS? Meaning if the applicant tracking software or system, depending on how you want to look at it, is out there and you see a job posted. I mean, I'm always out there noodling around because I'm sending jobs that I see to clients all the time. Like, here, this might be relevant to you. And we know people there. How do you bust through?
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. And you have to stick with trying to get an internal referral. That's what your goal is. In a nutshell, get an internal referral. An internal referral goes way further than you just applying into any applicant tracking system. So how do you do that? So for my students, I tell them first to look for alum. Look for alum. Alum are always looking to help students, not always, but most of the time. Yeah. So you're going to get some response. And your goal is to not ask them to give you an internal referral without speaking to you. Nobody is going to do that. You have to develop a relationship with them, have a conversation, ask them questions. Go into that conversation prepared to lead the discussion. The biggest mistake you can do is ask somebody to get on the phone with you and not be prepared to lead the discussion. Have the discussion with somebody. Hopefully it's going to go well. At the end of that conversation, hopefully they're going to say, I know you applied for this role. I'm going to send my colleague a note telling them that we spoke and giving an internal recommendation. If it is not an alum, it becomes a little bit more difficult, but not impossible, right? You have to figure out who the hiring manager is in the department that you're looking to get into. Oftentimes, 99% of the time, especially in the larger companies, a recruiter is screening you out or in. So and they've got a bazillion resumes. You can get in through the hiring manager. The hiring manager might be interested once you reach out to them directly. I will tell you, I sat in as interim head of HR for a technology company for 6 months. Every single time somebody reached out to the CEO of that company and got themselves out of the ATS, the CEO handed me the resume and said, can you talk to this person for me?
Wow. There you go.
Now, she was a pretty special lady.
Yeah.
She was pretty special. Yeah. Not everyone's going to do it, but if you can reach out to a hiring manager and write a thoughtful note about why they should consider you and make sure you understand their company, write a smart cover note or a smart cover email, there's a really good chance that you'll get you'll get a response. Yeah. You might not get it on everyone, but if you keep doing it, you will.
And you'll get better at it. The thing that you said that I think is, that I want to put like an extra spotlight on, because I get this a lot when people pitch me to come on my show, on the podcast. They'll be like, I do this. I want to be on your podcast. It's the same thing as, you going to someone who's an alumnus of your university and saying, you and I both went to the same college and I really want to get a job there. Right. You are putting all of the invisible labor on the person you're outreaching so that they have to make the connection versus you saying, here are my skills, here's what I can offer, like getting clear of bringing something to the conversation. There's a way of building that relationship where you can be useful and also be really, really conscious of time. Meaning someone is busy, they may only have 10 or 15 minutes. What are the 2 questions you want to ask them? How are you in and out strategically? How are you also, mindful and saying, you know what, I've taken up enough of your time. Is there anything I can do for you? Meaning they might say, we're looking for interns this year. If you have any friends or, any other graduates, we'd love to hear some, right? You can be helpful and be useful to them also.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say also one thing I always say to students is when you reach out, you need to say to them, this is what I'm interested in your outreach. Like, don't make them say, well, what are you interested in?
Yeah, don't be coy. This is not the time.
Right, like don't make them guess. I just had another idea when we were talking. I feel like every single university has their special little places, right? University of Michigan has a place that has the best muffins on the planet, right? So if I was going to be a student, I was reaching to an alum from the University of Michigan who took the time to get on the phone with me, I would send them a dozen muffins from that place that everybody knows is famous on the campus.
Oh, I love.
So send a little thank you.
I love
you
that.
You will be remembered.
You will be remembered. Yeah. And to your point, so to recap, do your homework, read the bios, even if they are an alumnus. Do they have a LinkedIn profile? What can you know about them? Don't be stalkerish, but do a gentle search. Maybe they spoke at a recent industry conference and you can acknowledge or comment on what you saw or give them a compliment that's authentic about what you saw. And again, be useful. And then if it fits that type of follow-up, I mean, you definitely become memorable. That's for sure.
Yeah. And the other thing that I would say is that I do think that sometimes people are shy and this is really hard to get them to do. And when I say you have to lead the conversation, some students get really nervous about that. Well, so, I pepper them with, questions that they can, different types of categories of questions that they can ask. And I always say this to the students, when in doubt and when in panic, ask them to tell you about themselves. Everyone likes to talk about themselves. That you can always lean on that if you need to.
Yes. And the last thing I would say is don't ask them anything that's Googleable. Like, don't ask them like, what do you see in the job market? Like, right. And don't ask them things like, do you have any feedback on my resume or how I can get this job? No, you have an outplacement counselor. If you're still in college, right, you have an outplacement counselor, or there's enough resources, whether it's someone like myself as a career coach or enough free resources out there that you can get feedback in those ways that this person, that's not what they're there for in this moment.
That is such a good point. I mean, what you're looking to ask is, well, how did you end up, getting at this company? What do you like the most? Tell me about the culture. What do you think are the top three things that, that really stand out in terms of the culture of the company? Or, how did you get into your position? Why did you choose this company?
Yes. All excellent. Okay. So the next question I have for you that comes in a lot is, all right, I've been through the interviews. I might be a semifinalist. I think I'm in the top pool. I know a client of mine who's at like 10 meetings, and each meeting has been more than one person in the interview, right? It's a very high level position, going to be a very public facing position. Fine, they're putting a lot of rigor on it. But now it's been 2 weeks. So what do you do? How much is too much? Is it, you've written your thank you notes, you've written your follow-ups. What do you do now?
Yeah. So I think part of this is that at the end of your interview, every stage that you've gone, first of all, you should ask up front if you're going through all these different stages. Can you tell me what the interview process looks like? So that you've got the interview process in place. And then at the end, when you are through the process, what I would ask is, can you give me an idea of where you are in terms of the number of people who have made it this round, if you're still looking, when I should be hearing back from you? So these are trigger points for you to understand the timelines, right? If you're the first person to make it through all of these interviews and they still have 2 people that are going to go through these 10 interviews, you can bet it's going to be a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So I would wait probably another 3 weeks if that were the case. So There's no particular exact formula, but you have to take the clues and make some inferences and then decide. I think the big thing is that you do want to follow up and express continued interest and be able to say, is there any additional information that I can give you to help you decide, what direction you are going to be in? And if you don't hear back when you follow up, I would follow up again at the end of the week. So I would send the email at the beginning of the week And then what I would do is at the end of the week, I would forward that email to the same person and say, following up in the subject line. And then I would write, hey, Jill, I just wanted to get on the top of your inbox. I know you're very busy. Just in case you didn't see my follow-up email, I remain extremely interested in this role. I know that you're interviewing. Can you let me know when you'll get back to me?
Beautiful. Love it. What if you suddenly in the process, and the amount of times this has happened is beyond shocking, there's now an internal candidate?
Yeah. And you're rejected?
No. They've said to you, I mean, the amount of times that I've heard this is surprising, where clearly they're always encouraged to hire and promote within. But something happened where that candidate didn't surface until they were well into the external interviewing process. So they're seeing other candidates. And then suddenly we have an internal candidate we need to interview. So now everyone that's on the list that has been interviewing externally is thinking, oh, great, I'm never going to beat out an internal candidate. What advice would you give there?
My guess would be that the internal candidate was probably in the process all along. That's one thing I would say. And they're having backup conversations just in case. I would say that the reality is internal candidates usually do win. And that's why you don't put all of your eggs in one basket. It is a two-way street. You do not take yourself off the market. You do not stop interviewing until you have an offer in your hand, period, end of discussion.
I did a podcast a few months ago about how job offer or job searching and dating are very similar. Like until there's a ring on it, you keep out there and you keep having conversations. If you're not engaged, you don't have an offer, you're a free agent. Keep going.
100%. It is a common analogy for sure, right? And also, if it were easy, it wouldn't be special.
Right. So what advice would you give to someone who's been in the market a while? I mean, we're in this wonky time where wages are still high, unemployment is still low. But yeah, there have been in certain sectors, there absolutely have been layoffs, which creates, adjacent layoffs because of the supporting, or just people being nervous of like, I don't really know what to do. 90 days left in our year. What advice would you give to people who have been out there searching for a while?
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there searching. And actually, I will say like recruiters are hurting worse than ever. I've never seen this many recruiters laid off. It's really unbelievable. And I would say that you have to keep at it, keep trying, but don't keep smashing your head into the wall to no avail by just sending your resumes into an applicant tracking system. If you're hitting that quick apply on LinkedIn and that's all you're doing, you will not get a job. You won't. You just won't. You have to network your way in. You have to keep trying to network. And that can be very difficult for people who are not type A, but you have to become comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to get out there. The other thing that I would say is that you have to pencil in some self-care. You have to.
I knew you and I were in a line. I said the same thing. The universe has given you the gift of time. Don't spend all day staring at your MacBook and thinking that you're going to be searching for a job all day long. It's not helpful for your brain, and self-care needs to take precedent.
You can. And what you can do is you can mark your calendar, let's say 3 hours a day to work on your job search. And then you need to go out. You need to go take a walk. You need to take a hike. You might be, strapped on cash. So you don't want to spend money. There are plenty of things that you can do for free to clear your mind and take care of yourself. And because it can be mentally exhausting, and it's so important to take that time to care for yourself. The other thing that you can do is look into trying to make yourself a little bit more marketable. So it could be that you take some classes, or, even if it's an online certification program that's less expensive, that will help to make you a little bit more marketable. I think that's good. Volunteer if you can, do something good. Go to conferences. In your industry, when you see a conference is happening, raise your hand and see if you can help. because if you help, even on a volunteer basis, you're working with
a lot of
people,
time.
you're networking with people, and people are getting to know your work ethic and how you are and who you are, and they're going to be more likely to help you. So you have to get out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, I've seen a lot, at least in New York City conferences, if you volunteer, like we have advertising week coming up shortly. If you volunteer, a lot of times you'll get to attend some of it for free in order to keep costs down. And also I would say, check out your local library, either to volunteer or to take courses. A lot of times, if you have a library card, you can attend a lot of those courses and classes for nominal $10, $15 type things. And sometimes they're also free in order to keep costs down. And then the last area that I would say is LinkedIn. If you are on LinkedIn, there are a lot of courses that LinkedIn has. And what LinkedIn also likes is that from an algorithm standpoint, when you take those courses, you come up higher in the search returns when recruiters are looking for you. So things to keep in mind and making sure that you're optimizing that LinkedIn profile. Remember that your resume is one part of the marketing document. Right now, your LinkedIn is the other part of the marketing product. So you are the product that we are marketing right now. We need to make sure that both those entities, both the resume and the LinkedIn profile, are updated, because you're going to come up higher in the search returns if you do so.
Yeah, and connect with people. Don't forget to do that. Ask people to connect with you. You know, people will mostly say yes. The more connections you make is very helpful. But also you can teach yourself things, like from a technology point of view. Let's say you want to learn Excel. You're not a master at Excel. It's easy enough take an hour out of your day to do some video tutorials that you can find online for free to become really good at something like Excel.
And YouTube has a ton of really good videos that you can also find too. So all good. Jane, this was really helpful. I know that everyone who's listening to this is probably going to rewind and listen to it again and grab a note and jot down some of your thoughts. So I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with our listeners today. I will put in the show notes where you can follow Jane on LinkedIn. It is a treat to see the content that she writes and the good that she's putting out into the world. And I thank you for being here, Jane.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Career Refresh podcast. If you're enjoying this and you want more information, go to my website, jillgriffincoaching.com. There you can find information on how to work with me one-on-one, or my group programs, or even bring me into your workplace. I'll put the link to my website in the show notes. But hey, listen, before you go, do me a favor, rate and review this podcast, because it definitely helps me get the word out to people everywhere so that they can also thrive in the workplace. All right, friends, I appreciate you. I'll see you soon.